Hey everyone, my name is Jared,
And I'm Autumn,
and welcome to Coaches and Dragons.
Coaches and Dragons.
And this week, we're excited to dive into a character build focusing on the wild side. So, for those of you who have not been able to follow along yet, for this month, we're diving into everything druids, how to embrace our wild side, how to tap into wild shape in real life, and all the things that make a druid's nature magic super magical. And so, for this week's build, we're going to dive in and see what we might be able to learn from a character that helps us unleash our wild side.
There's something about this that makes me really excited, tapping into our like chaotic good kind of vibe that we have always got carrying around. I feel like this is the druid, the wild side, the chaotic good. Like, I don't know. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I think it's super good.
This is going to be really fun.
Well, so maybe to kick us off, so for each of these character builds, what we like to do is we come up with a set of character goals. So things that define success for this character. We'll walk through a little bit of design inspiration to help us kind of create a concept for the character. And then finally finish up with some design rules to make sure that we really stay focused and that this character delivers for the goals that we have in mind.
Mm.
To kind of help ground us, Autumn, when you think of the wild side, what pops to mind?
Well, I mean, this is no secret to anybody who's heard me talk about our wild side guide, but my favorite part of the whole thing is diving in on seasons.
Hmm.
Looking at the seasons, at the cycles, every time I hear about that, like my idea generator just lights up. There's so many different ways to take it, and there's something that I just really love about the ability to look at systems and cycles and have that as a source of like I can do anything, I can be wild cuz like the next season's just going to come and it's okay. So I kind of feel like the goal, I would love it if there was something that was playful around. It doesn't have to be seasons, but just playful around cycles.
Yeah, I love that. I think playful around cycles feels like enough of an idea. And I think either a way that they embrace it, like there might be a role playing aspect to it, there might be a way that their abilities change. And I think druids prepare spells. So there could be a way that they might have like a seasonal flavor
Yeah.
baked in there. I think that's a great idea. I think for me, when I think about the wild side and the character goals, I think it is there's a little bit of an energy of like when we talk about wild side, there's something that very othered about it and very freedom, like you said, chaotic good energy wise around
Mhm.
it. And I wonder with this character that's focusing on the wild side to almost like find a way to really push that to the edge. Like what, like whether it's like pushing, I think of like Dionysus, right? Where it's this wild growing things and like Bacchanalia, like really just like finding ways to let go and not so much wild in a like brutal beast ferocious way like I'm going to do
Mhm.
harmful things but like wild in terms of like larger than life we're going to do like turn things up to a 12 all the time almost maybe even invoking like some stereotypes of like a bard but pulling in
Ooh.
like it's wild it's bigger it's larger than life like it is connected to things that are bigger than me bigger than the stuff around me but it's just always trying to find ways to take things up to 11 like it's not just a blooming flower it is a like bouquet that kind of
Yeah.
energy.
So it's the vibe I'm getting is extra.
Yes. Plays with cycles and extra done.
Extra. Yeah, I mean, that's at first when you were talking about things, tapping into that what like I got this sense of like just total like free, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think about these, maybe I think about like that stereotypical like hippie that's just like I'm yesing to everything and it's just whatever is and you're just there for it. But then you took it this extra place where this extra place where it's we're going to 12 and there's something super exciting about that. I also feel like there would need to be some balance because I'm like I feel like I might be exhausted playing a character that had to be extra all the time.
But I think that's actually, I think that's the like the edge we want to push here. Because when I think about if you're going to learn from a character who embraces the wild side, I
Mm-hmm.
think it is about knowing those limits right? Knowing your capacity, but I think it goes back to what really makes a druid a druid. It's embracing what comes naturally, but also know that like naturally you're like the environment will take care of itself, right? Nature will restore itself. Nature will always find a way to like invoke Jurassic Park here a little bit. But I think there is like if I'm thinking about I want to learn from what it means to indulge the wild side, I think it is embracing those limits. It is challenging norms. It is pushing those growth edges, druid pun intended, and seeing all the things that can be done and seeing what all is out there because we do live in this beautiful, rich, complex, like, why not get obsessed with bees and the way that they structure their colonies and everything else? Like, I don't know, there's something about it that feels
Ooh.
very druid. If I, again, was wanting to play someone that teaches me how to learn from the wild side, I want to feel wild, all caps.
Mm. Okay, I'm so excited already. Like I'm telling you, this one is so us because like I just have ideas pouring out of my head right now for this
Yeah.
character.
Well, let's keep it going. Let's do what
Yeah.
if you're again, I think about a character that will teach us
Mm-hmm.
something about the wild side. What is a
Mm-hmm.
third goal that we can hold in mind as we're kind of creating this character?
I. It feels like there's something that's making me feel like, especially with the wildness and with the
Mm-hmm.
cycles, that there needs to be a really strong anchor to something.
Say more about the anchor.
So I mean more of what is what is this person's mission? What's their passion? What's their what's the thing that connects it all for them?
Hmm.
But this thing of like, okay, yeah, there are cycles, which with those, maybe those are things that happen to them. The idea of being wild and being extra, you can go and you can do a lot of different things. But even with that, sometimes there's a choice of what you're not going to do, right? If you're going to go to 12 on something, that means you're not going to go to a 12 on something that might be right next to it. And so it feels like there's something of how might this person, like, does there need to be something really grounded, like for us, right? Of yes, I can experiment and I can be super playful and adventurous and extra in all of these different places as long as it stays true to me.
Yes. Okay. I think where that we could frame this goal, I think it's in the groundedness word that you said.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this is true for anyone who's wanting to like take risks and experiment and go bigger. And I think this actually ties really nicely into the cycles. We have like an energetic ebb and flow. And so they need to, if they're going to have a flow as the wild, they need to have an ebb. And maybe that ebb is the very grounded place that,
Mm-hmm.
and then the goal is that the grounded place connects to the wild place. So it doesn't feel like this character is going from a discipline to a wild state. They are like 100% wild state, but it is like, what is their earthy, grounded, calm version that is still inherently wild versus this larger than life, everything's blooming, extra, extra, extra version of wild. Like if we can find a way to create that range and have this character help someone experience that range of it's all wild, but there's a grounded flavor and there is a like larger than life overflowing version.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great that would be a huge win.
Mm. I love it. I'm so
All
excited
right.
for the character inspiration. Like I don't know if you saw, like I just had to pull up my, I'm like, I just have to write these things down right now because I will forget.
Well, let's dive in. Character inspiration. Hit me with it.
Okay, so the first thing that started, like, as soon as you were talking about the ebb and flow, I was feeling this thing of like this character that kind of exists in two different places depending on what's going on. So there's this thing that, like, I think we should pick one, or maybe we will come up with another version of this. But things I'm thinking of with that are like Jekyll and Hyde.
Mm-hmm.
Like you are one or the other, but when you're one, you're not the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you exist in both of these spaces. The other thing is like a werewolf, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
this thing of like you exist as this human, but when a certain thing happens, you are going to exist as this other thing. And there's something that's interesting where I don't know if it's like I was imagining this that it's like you exist as this, and then in other parts of the cycle you exist as something maybe completely different, and so you can be wild, but you still have to keep in mind that there's this other piece about. I don't know. I'm curious what
Hmm.
you think, but that's the
Well,
feeling I was getting.
it makes me think of, and I would love to get to like a specific inspiration to pull from,
Yes.
but like while we're in this generative place, it makes me think of superheroes. Like there's Clark Kent and there's Superman, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like the Incredibles as a domestic family unit, and then the Incredibles as a family of superheroes. And so
Yes.
there is like a switch that happens,
Mm-hmm.
but there's, or, like Sailor Moon, right? There is like Sailor, like student by day, like magical girl transformation,
Yes.
when time comes for it. So I think I think, yeah, let's take that as an inspiration. Number
Mm-hmm.
one, what feels like the right place to pull from for that character?
I think part of what's making it tough is I'm thinking about this thing of like, I really love this idea of this person having a real connection to the cycle and having that have some kind of impact to what's going on with them. But at the same time, I'm feeling like I want it to seem like maybe there is some choice to it as well.
Yeah, I think this is a
So,
character that maybe they're
mm,
connected, but I don't think it's a determinate thing.
mm-hmm.
If I can like invoke a veto, I feel like there's something about the werewolf thing that makes it feel like that is
Yes.
a decision that's
Yeah.
forced on them versus
Yes.
this is the moment, this is the time when I want to unleash. Like I whatever
Yeah.
the transformation is, it should be like something. I think that's why the superhero thing seems really relevant.
Yes.
Is there's something about invoking
Mm-hmm.
the wild side
Yeah.
versus being forced into inhabiting that, right?
Yeah.
Which would be like the kind of werewolf, like it's the full moon
Mm-hmm.
archetype. So,
Yeah.
you know what? I think for this build, I think maybe we lean into, as our superhero inspiration, I think there could be something really fun about that magical girl transformation moment, like the Sailor Moon energy.
I mean, I will say, when you said Sailor Moon, I felt that one.
Okay, so Sailor Moon it is.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so like we usually
absolutely.
do for these inspirations, it's a mashup. So Sailor Moon meets blank. Okay,
Okay.
Sailor Moon
Yeah.
meets the genie from Aladdin.
Specifically the Robin Williams version.
Specifically the Robin
Specifically.
Williams,
Yes.
like, yes,
In
that
fact,
kind of like chaos extra, like shape shifting, like, oh, you don't know what it is, like, and it's going to be bigger, it's going to be badder, it's going to be illustrative, it's not, it's like, and again, freedom being the key thing.
yes. And I like it because there is some groundedness. There are still some rules around that. But yeah, specifically, let there be no mistake. We are specifically talking about the Robin Williams Aladdin. I'm not messing around with any other Aladdins.
And in all
Or
honesty, I think
genies from the
Robin
Aladdin.
Williams in general could be the inspiration here. Like Sailor Moon meets Robin
Yeah.
Williams.
Oh, he's so wonderful. Okay, I'm I'm so excited for this.
Is there any like fun twist we want to put on it? Sailor Moon
Yeah.
meets Genie from Aladdin, Robin Williams version.
Yes.
But if they were David Attenborough,
Done.
done.
Done. Done. Done. Done. Done. I don't know how we got to that, but yes.
Done. We don't need to go further. That's the
Yeah.
inspiration. It's got nature documentary. It's got observations of what's going on.
Yeah.
We've got some magical girl transformation and some larger than life, like extra mega magical things happen out of nowhere.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Like that was so I don't know how we bounced around to that. Folks, this is the magic of brainstorming and ideating. This is how you get yes and play around with friends. Like, yes.
And trust me, we edited out a lot of this brainstorming session. Okay.
What combo would you have wanted to put together? Let us know in the comments. Maybe we'll do a round 2.
Any final design rules for this character? We've talked about character goals. We've talked about inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Any final constraints, rules that we want to put in
Mm-hmm.
place to really make sure that this character concept lands?
Yeah. I think the rules that I want to put in place is I know normally we try to do some kind of like weird like kind of cheeky thing where like the wild side one inspired by the druid wouldn't be a druid, but I'm saying like let's make a druid. Let's let it be the druid.
Well, so I think to round this out, if we're thinking about design rules, we
Yeah.
have the character goals, we have some inspiration for the build. I think with design rules, it's the wild side. So we want to stick with
Mm-hmm.
the druid. That's what we're going to do. We're going to build a druid and figure out how to incorporate all of this to make kind of the druided of druids.
Yeah.
I think if we say no, there's a couple of things I could think of that we could say no to help make this character like feel a little bit tighter. I think we could say no to like no to being a party pooper, right? They've got to like yes and pick on the energy.
Mm-hmm.
But that feels more of like a role-playing choice. I almost feel like the say no might be to saying no to fauna. Like a character that doesn't focus, if we're going to be focusing on druids, this is not about like unleashing the party animal. This is about much more about playing with the environment, or maybe they're more plant focused, much less animal focused and wild shape, like to kind of step away from a party animal trope as we've kind of like engineered it, but something that we want to kind of take. Maybe it's not that we don't use the wild shape, but the way we use wild shape is not going to be like beast mode activated, as we've talked about it in the wild side.
Yes, I love that. Because I think it's so interesting that you said that, because every time I've been thinking about this character and starting to visualize them, and every time it's always been with flora.
Yes.
I have not once pictured them with fauna. Not once.
Yeah.
So I'm here for that.
Cool. All right. I think that's it. So with this information, I'm going to go make the build, and we're going to come back and see how we do and see how we meet these character goals. I think it's time for an insight check.
I got a 15.
So if you failed the insight check, make sure to like and subscribe. If you beat the 15, let us know in the comments what kind of character you would build to unleash your wild side. I am so excited to share with you this week's character build.
Yay! I'm excited.
Are you ready?
I can't wait to see our little druid.
Little druid.
Or maybe it's a big druid. I don't know.
Mysteries abound.
Tell me.
All right. So you walk into a tavern and you see in the far corner an Earth Ganassi figure with skin like iron ore, dotted with freckles and the blush of rust, dressed in dark velvet robes and silver rings adorning their wrists and fingers. What would be his hair is piled up like an afro, pockmarked and shaped almost like lava rock or a meteorite. And he is surrounded by drunken, sleeping figures, now oblivious to the stones dancing in orbital patterns in the air before them. You catch the Ganassi's words on the air. And by simply watching the sky, we can detect all matter of anomalies and investigate these deviations in the natural order. They are almost like beautiful errors in the sky. Isn't that wild? And you see one of the stones start to glow and streak across the tavern to land, leaving a small crater at your feet. Alrighty. So that's our character, and I would like to introduce you to Brianite, also known as Brian.
Brianite.
A little bit of backstory for Brianite. So Brianite, also known as Brian, if you don't want to know his full name, he is, so yes.
Can I call him Bri?
Oh yeah, you can call him Bri.
Okay. All right, cool.
Okay. So Brianite, also known as Bri, if you want to call him that, is an Earth Ganassi scholar who has spent actually much of his life studying the paths and planets of the stars above. And so in particular, shooting stars have been the focus of their research as both omens of good fortune and misfortune, and like all of the mysterious properties associated with them. And after leaving his monastery in search of the site of a meteorite, he simply just never returned. And he's just ever curious about all the life that teems between his two true loves, the stars above and the earth below. So where I envision Brianite as our druid enabling the goals, the cycles that he's attuned to are the cycles of the planets and the orbits, and like also all the irregularities. Like maybe there's comets that only come every few hundred years, and being attuned to those different cycles. And again, these mysterious omens in the sky. very much attuned to the earth as an earth ganassi. Like a lot of their spells that they've chosen and like prepared are like very much of the earth or somehow related to the world above. This idea of the wild side, literally how much bigger can you get than space? And this idea that you could be both of like a gravitational mass like of the earth and like all the wildness that is in the earth and the rock and the stone, and then also like this idea of kind of Carl Sagan's we're all made of stardust and shooting stars and space rocks and like all this very much larger than life energy. And finally the grounded ebb and flow, it just rocks. And so how could you rip off this like scholar stoner like wishing stone archetype druid? And that's kind of the core of what makes kind of Brianite.
Oh. I love how this character could have been either that accent that you gave it or also like that crystal loving LA person.
There's definitely a long lost sister. That is the
I feel like a lot of us know Bry.
the Valley Girl Gem Gal. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Oh, this is very cool. I first of all, we know that I like I don't know if we know this, but I'm telling y'all, I think freckles are super cute and I like them. So I love that had like little freckles with rust and yeah, I'm very excited to see what people how people might draw him.
Mm,
Um, yeah, like there's something very intriguing. I love I don't know. I'm very excited. Your description of him was very like enticing.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but then like this, you know, the people asleep. I'm curious, like, what was it that was like, were they bored of him talking? Was there some kind of spell happening? Like, there's something intriguing about that. But then, like, all the rocks and the wonder and like connecting into the stars, there's something like really cool about that. I'm very
Yeah.
excited about. I could see a lot of really interesting side quests with this character too. I feel like there's a lot of play room for the person who's playing the character and also for the DM to incorporate some various backgrounds, whatever the player ends up deciding to kind of build out as Bry's background. What it Brianite as Brianite's background.
Well, let's break down the character. That's a good segue.
Yes.
So, a couple things, like mechanically speaking. So, Brianite is a druid, which we had said was one of our design constraints. But to hit on that Sailor Moon transformation fantasy, they are a Circle of Stars Druid. So, the Circles of Stars Druid are very much like connected to the astrological bodies. And what's really cool is with their wild shape, instead of turning into a beast form, they can actually take on a starry form. And so there's a couple different starry forms that they can choose from. One of which is an archer, which allows you to like shoot magical bolts. There's also a chalice form, which like enables stronger healing, and a dragon form, which allows them to kind of basically do better on concentration checks and other like different saving throws. And so they get to choose which of these forms to unleash. And to me, that really fit the Sailor Moon brief and this idea of, again, going into their wild side. Their wild side is this like big, magnificent, like powered by starlight energy, and figuring out how to role play that would be really interesting. And I think this idea too, you could of course like reflavor any of these, but it's you know, as it's described in Circle of Stars, it, you know, this constellation appears on their body, so it's almost like Brianite's like body becomes like this like space, like goes from like earth rock to space rock, which I thought was really interesting, hit on that kind of Sailor Moon transformation energy. And then to pull in the genie, again, I think there's like a little bit of the attitude, but I think this idea of like meteorites, shooting stars, like making a wish happen, right? Like maybe that's like his go-to with like little kids, is like to teach them about the stars, and like they can make a wish on a star. And to tie that in flavor-wise, like Circle of Stars Druids also get guidance as a free cantrip, and they also learn guiding bolt. So there is this kind of idea of like direction and making things happen and like kind of pointing the way, like adding that little spark and sizzle to really capture a little bit of that Robin Williams genie, but in a David Attenborough delivery.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love that like mixture. It's I feel I really have been interested in figuring out like playing a druid in a future campaign, and I feel like you have just designed the one I want to play. It feels
Yay.
so fun. I like just even thinking about there's something that I really enjoy about reducing down the number of wild shapes that can happen. I can get really caught up in decision fatigue, and so having a few to pick from, like I could see there's so much room to play with that and explore that. And I think taking in again to like having us play this character as a way to learn and to grow and to tap in, it's pretty realistic in that we often have these different perspectives, these different personas that we can take on. And so I think it's such a great way for the player to get to learn, like, oh, I'm going into this scenario, let me bring in the dragon. I'm going into this scenario, let me bring in the archer. Because that's what we do outside of the game all the time.
Absolutely. And I think to be at choice with that is really compelling. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we talked about unleashing the wild side and still being grounded. And I thought there's something about the way that, again, you're at choice and in how to like lean into that and like
Mm-hmm.
tap into this larger than life power. And so the skills that Brian Knight already brings are that ability to bring in the wild side, bring into this like, and even in the spell selection, which we can dive into, these spells that really shape the battlefield, like above and below. And so, where I think the character Brian Knight could really grow is actually in those like in person, like social interactions. This idea that they're like a cloistered scholar that's been like stuck in a monastery and is like going out, knows everything about the planets, knows everything about like Earth and geology, knows little to nothing about like like how life operates at an in between layer. And I think that would be a really fun way to like lean into the wild side and like have excuse to kind of flout societal convention because like why would you not like look at the stars and do all this like really cool big wild stuff, turn the volume up to a 12, but at the same time like really not great at like understanding the social cues and like understanding like why, if this is not of a large cosmic significance, you would even indulge in this. And so there
Yeah.
could be like a fun play socially to like they get to flout societal convention and flout expectations to like
Mm-hmm.
give into that wild side. But that becomes kind of the role play growth of, hey, there's this all of this life in between that they haven't studied, that they haven't really engaged with, that like has that David Attenborough like, oh my gosh, isn't it fascinating? They're sitting there having their fourth drink. I swear he only had three, but then he said, no, I would have a fourth. And then he's gonna just walk out of here and go on an adventure. Isn't that wild? Like it's like everything is like fascinating, but like narrated in that way
Oh,
as if it's a brand new observation because it is.
yeah. It definitely feels like this is the character that takes on that like high charisma, like the one that you need to send in to make friends really quickly because he, it's that compliment somebody right away and they're going to be like, "Yes, I would love to talk to you more." Like you make me feel really good about myself. And it sounds like Brian I would be really great at that. Of like, "Wow, you're amazing. Your hair, this food, like just appreciating these moments." But I also think it's super cool about, you don't always have to be in a city. It can be when you are just walking on the road. Like I could see them saying like all of a sudden if a setting changes, noticing a different tree or a leaf or how a leaf starts to change color because a cycle has changed or like what would this character do when they go into the Fey world? Like what would happen? I feel like it would just be mind blowing every time Brian Knight goes to a setting that they've never been in before.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think that's like the really fun of like this type of character, like having it where everything is like brand fresh and new. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
coming from a jaded place. It's coming from a like you have permission to explore and narrate and like just get involved.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like I think if you were to really indulge the wild side in a different direction, right? It might be a little bit destructive. It might be like rambunctious. And he's like just genuinely thrilled
Yeah.
about everything that's going on.
Which is fantastic. Again, if we think about like, why are we playing this character, right? We're playing this character so that we ourselves can be learning and taking things to adapt into our real life. And so, this thing of like the unknown, it can be scary or it can be exciting, right? Like, it's, oh, I'm going into this new space, and this character is a way to go in and say, like, okay, what are the things that I can rely on that I know to be true, right? I know about Earth, I know about the sky, I know about these systems, I know there's going to be flora and fauna. They can rely on all of these things that they do know to then go into the unknown and see how they can be placed into those things or create new. So it's almost like this character is such a great way to not focus on the unknown in a scary way, right? But it's like I'm tapping into what is known to me so I can be
Yeah.
thrilled about the unknown. So I can be excited about the unknown.
Yeah. And
Mm.
I love that quote around like, we're all just made of stardust. This idea that
Mhm.
at some level, like the chemistry that's on this planet is the same chemistry that's out in the stars. And I think using that to invite the gratitude and the openness and like the appreciation that like as Brianite is like leaving the monster, it's like all of this is made of stardust. Like it doesn't matter like what it is. And I think again, figuring out how to play that in a more comedic way, which is like even the enemy, even like an opposing foe, it's like, hey, like we're all made of stardust, man. Like, and just leaning into that again, maybe not like the brightest bulb, but like we're all just connected and like really leaning into the generosity of that um,
Oh,
in a way that just, again, I think allows you to have that permission to go into that wild side, right? It's grounded, but it's bigger because like we're all connected. What could be bigger than that, right? Than the universe and all of its ties.
I feel like with the wrong alignment, this character could easily be a cult leader. So,
Oh, we haven't dug into the monastery. Maybe the monastery is just a cult
oh
that we
yeah,
just left.
true, true. All right, what else we got?
Well, I want to dive into. I'm glad you mentioned the charisma because I did kind of try to like build this character where he more so than most druids who might be like more hermity. I bumped up the charisma a little bit. Definitely dumped intelligence by comparison. So drilling into that, not the brightest bulb.
Like, there's such an interesting thing about the idea of reducing the intelligence because it's surprising me at first because especially when I think about the David Attenborough lens, I think about the intelligence and the knowledge and everything that goes in. But and so I'm like, okay, wait a minute. How does this tie in? How does having this lower intelligence tap into what it is we're trying to learn from playing of this character? And the thing that jumps out to me is this, like, sometimes our intelligence is the thing that gets in the way of us being thrilled and excited and experiencing. Um, Sometimes we know too much and we use that to make assumptions that are not correct. Is that kind of what you were thinking as you were putting this intelligence down, or was there a different angle?
I think what I wanted to, what I wanted to do with the intelligence is if you, I love the explanation of like intelligence versus wisdom versus charisma. If you were to
Mm-hmm.
talk about tomatoes, intelligence is knowing that tomatoes is a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put a tomato in a fruit salad, and charisma is being able to take that fruit salad with a tomato in it and call it salsa. And so I think it was more so if you're playing Brianite and a druid, which you naturally want to lean into wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
it's this idea that it's less about like the book smarts of it, like the technical details, but more so about, again, the wisdom of a tradition
Mm-hmm.
like astronomy or astrology. This idea that there's like something like deeper and more profound as the place of it versus like kind of like getting into the weeds. Because I think even with David Attenborough, there is an intelligence there, but it
Mm-hmm.
comes from like an observation and then the implications of that
Mm-hmm.
versus like kind of like dropping facts. Like, did you know? Like, that's a very different energy than
Yeah.
watch as like the small little chipmunk seeks to actually evade its prey and like seeing like that broader situation and
Yeah.
having that perception felt like much more of a wisdom thing versus the kind of like book smarts intelligence piece. And I think again going back to that, their their knowledge is driven by like awe and this like much deeper personal place than maybe say they've been studying away the books and have like just a theoretical knowledge of the world.
Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna double down then, like, because I love that thinking of it and reflecting back on kind of like how David Attenborough looks at that. Because you're right, it is very much this observation. It's a that nuance in the word choice does matter there, and I think that really helps with the role play of this. Um, yeah, and then I'm just gonna like double underline the lesson that the big insight I'm taking is sometimes your intelligence gets in the damn way. Like you're like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, it is a tomato, but it's a fruit, so it really should be in the fruit salad. You know, it's like it can get in the way, and all of a sudden you have a fruit salad that people don't want to eat because you didn't turn it into a salsa. Um, but yeah, like, I love that. That's like big insight for the day. Love it, Jared.
Love it. Ah, cool. I'm so glad that landed. All right. Should we chat spells?
Let's talk about spells, baby.
It's spells from A to Z, but not quite. So what I love about druids and like most spellcasting classes, there's a lot of like flexibility in the spell list, but I think more so with druids than other classes, because it's like nature magic in origin, there's a lot of ways to kind of flex and narrow. And I love this idea of kind of picking a lane for a druid to say, like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, they have access to all this nature magic, but like what is their kind of go-to spells list? And so from cantrip perspective, I love taking the idea of magic stone. And so magic stone, you actually get to imbue pebbles and make a ranged spell attack with them. And so that kind of little like demonstration that they're doing with the spells, like that's a function of like magic stone, right? To like imbue it and like give it a little bit of like an arcane punch to do a little bit of damage as like an early cantrip. Um, and before I get to that, I thought that with this druid in particular, this idea of earth and space and gravity is what largely informed the spell selection. So even that kind
Mm-hmm.
of like orbital demonstration at a level 4, I had them take the telekinetic feat. So it's this idea almost like maybe less moving things with their mind, but like this idea of like managing the gravity of different objects in a light way, like being able to like create these like small little orbital patterns with the rocks and the pebbles, right? To like do these little demonstrations, I thought was a really kind of neat way to play with that. And then it gives them kind of this like fun push pull to like double down on that feeling of gravity and movement and earth, in addition to the kind of overall Ganassi theme.
When you talked about the telekinesis one, I don't know like what its limitations are. I haven't played that spell before, but it makes me think of this thing where him, like, somebody, a creature that's trying to hide from us or something like that, him like using that to just kind of lift up and being like, there you are, hey, there you are. And then we like can see them and do what we need to do, or like expose traps or different things. Like I see that in that really playful kind of way,
Yeah.
that's really exciting.
Well, and the way the telekinetic feat works is it basically gives you access to an invisible mage hand. So functionally for like small objects, like there could be some like levitation, right? And be like, oh, where's the key? And it's like, there it is, and like pop it up, like you said. Otherwise, for other creatures, it's much more of a like push and pull situation where you
Mm.
kind of like get to like exert some force on them. So I don't think you can actually take them straight up, but I love like the flavor of, especially if it was like a small little creature being like, I think rule of cool, like, yes, you get to look them straight in the air and be like, peekaboo,
Peekaboo.
small little anti-gravity field, boop, and
I
pop
love
them out.
it.
Some other goodies. So Circle of Stars, like we mentioned, they have access to guidance and guiding bolt. And guiding bolt, they actually get to use a proficiency bonus number of times per day. So it's like a nice little damage spell outside of their usual repertoire. Some of the other spells that we have here
With guiding
include.
bolt, sorry. With guiding bolt, I could see there being a choice with the DM to make a skin on that to like change it from guiding bolt to be something that's like lined up with space more.
Well, and yeah, I'm 100% a proponent of like reflavoring spells. I think in this instance with Bryanite, reflavoring it as like a shooting star, right? This idea of
Yes.
like maybe like instead of an archer form, it's like almost like a spiraling galaxy, and then like a little like mote of light gets to go and they like zing it across, right? It's almost like a star gets like flung out from it.
Yes.
Yeah, here for that. And so then some of the other things we've got going on, we've got spells like Earthbind, right? This idea of like pushing things down with gravity, a couple healing spells in there just for like good measure to take use of that chalice form. And then they also, as an Earth Ganassi, get access to Blade Ward as a bonus action. So it's a cantrip that they can use to actually kind of protect themselves and prevent some bludgeoning, slashing, piercing damage. And it's a bonus action, but I think it goes back to this idea of resilience. And again, I could see this idea of either you lean on the Ganassi's like own kind of rock-like form, or even gravity, right? It's like a deflection. It's like a different use of energy. And they also have access to pass without trace. And so with that in mind, this idea of the terrain and the battlefield, I opted in for spells like Spike Growth to really change like the type of earth that's there and make it difficult and dangerous to go through. And of course, you could do the telekinetic plus Spike Growth, where you actually rake people through it and do damage as you wanted to, which is really gnarly. And also like a spell like Erupting Earth, and this idea maybe like instead of erupting Earth, where it's this like magma flow or earthquake, it might be like a spectral meteorite that like comes in and crash lands and creates that disruption and creates that difficult terrain. spells like Hold Person to create that gravitational hold on folks. And
Mm.
so I think there's a lot of, we talked about using flora over fauna, and I think there's a lot of really great spells, though, that feel like if they aren't in a star form, they're ways that are like really manipulating the battlefield. And again, going back to even like their strengths and weaknesses as a character, like they are thinking so big picture, like the land is their tool, like the stars are their tool. They aren't focused on like casting a spell to like really hone in on one target, or like transforming themselves into beasts to like really hone in on a couple enemies. It's this like much larger kind of battlefield picture. And even a spell like Moonbeam, where it's like literally pulling on like space magic to like create an area of damage and like hurt maybe shape-shifting creatures or that type of thing. So a lot of different spells to kind of concentrate on, a lot of spells that change the battlefield, but very much like either from above or like from below to really make all that magic work.
Mm. I love it so much. And there's something super interesting about like when I think about the ability to manipulate the terrain. Again, if we're thinking about like what am I learning as I play this character? There's so much like I feel like I could see myself learning to say like, okay, I need to erupt Earth. Like things just got real. I need to erupt Earth really quick. You know, I can see saying that out loud in certain situations in my life, needing to do that or make things difficult terrain or even to smooth it out, right?
Yeah.
So it's I love these choices to be able to go. I just feel like this is probably this character above all of the ones that you've created so far feels like the one that has so many amazing insights. And maybe this is just the one I really need to be playing, which is why it's speaking to me so much. Maybe it's got a lot of learnings I need to have, um, which is why I feel like I desperately need to play him.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, even with spells that create like difficult terrain, like especially if you're a player in a team, like there are certain spells that actually make things harder for everyone else at times.
Mm,
And I could see where a spell like Erupting Earth or Spike Growth, like maybe there is an impulse to just like handle the situation, but like maybe Brian Knight forgets like, oh crap, like I just blocked off like a key exit for everyone else and trying to like keep folks at bay. So
ugh.
again, you don't want to necessarily, it's like how do you even like incorporate mistakes or like ill decisions where they might be so focused on the big picture they might forget that, hey, you just trapped so and so on the other side of that spike growth, like, and now we've created a
Yeah.
different situation. And it's hard to do that as a character like intentionally, but I think giving yourself as a character permission to say, I'm going to go for the big plays, go for like the big moments, and maybe not get so caught up in the nuts and bolts of like, unless it's like a healing thing, right? Which again, saving teams is a camaraderie thing, but I'm not going to get focused on any like one enemy or one piece. It's like I'm
Mm.
here to do the thing and do like the biggest, earth shattering thing I can do, and having that be the really like escalation of it feels like a really cool way to play a druid, and I think feels like something only the druids can do. I can't think of another class that has the same level of like environmental manipulation, that other than maybe like a wizard throwing a fireball around, but like again that feels like very one note compared to I'm going to create an area of difficult terrain that like you're gonna have to like scrabble rocks to get to me, like good luck, come at me, bro.
Yeah. I've got to admit, like, I feel like we name it. We're coaches and we learn, like, when you have these things, you name them out loud. And it just so happens that this is happening while we're recording. And so, congratulations, audience. You get to see this in real life. But I feel incredibly overwhelmed with emotion right now. Like, when you were calling out this idea of, like, sometimes we make things difficult for the whole party. Like, that just slammed into me big time, this thing of like, and not so much about difficult for the whole party. What it ended up like, how it translated into my head was there are times when I will do like Erupting Earth and make things really difficult for myself.
Mm.
And that's like that's how it translated in my head, and all of a sudden it was like, oh shit. Like I feel like this just like put some things from the past couple of weeks that I've been like experiencing like into this whole other thing. But I wanted to share that here. Like, I would have always shared this with Jared. For those of you watching, I would have always shared this with Jared. But like, it's what's really cool is getting to share this on a recording right now, because this is the power of what we're talking about when we get to go in and play these characters and take on these things. There are all these little nuggets of insights that you never quite know how it's going to land until it
Yeah.
does. Like, we've done several of these. This one, like, I I feel it like big time. I feel this thing of like, okay, I need to process this. Once this thing is over, I need to go take some time, because I feel like, I don't know. So I wanted to share that here with you, Jared, but then also as a learning moment, because this is the power of like how freaking cool creating a character can be on our own self-learning and our growth. We were just talking about erupting Earth.
Yeah. Well, and I'll even add, like in part one, when we were talking about the character goals, I personally, first of all, I love co-creating these characters. And I think it's such a cool way to create a character in some way. So like say, hey, this is an area we want to work on, and then to have a thought partner to co-create it. But I thought it was really interesting because I could feel even some hesitancy on the like, hey, if we turn the volume up to a 12, what is that going to be like? And like, I could feel this like, hey, but like maybe they're grounded. Maybe there's like some like time away from it, right? Maybe we can find ways to like pull them back. And so that got baked into the character goals, right? But I think what you're highlighting is this idea of when we go into that wild side, it can feel very disruptive. It can feel very much like, ooh, we might be actually be putting ourselves in harm's way versus and putting others in harm's way without knowing it. And I think that is like a wild side that's out of balance. And I think we created this character in other ways to say, hey, they aren't out of balance. We don't want to create someone who's going to deliberately bring harm or be reckless or indulgent in that type of way, but we want them to capture that freedom and that grandness and hugeness that a wild side can bring. Like, it's Mother Nature. Like, it doesn't get bigger than the rock we're floating on. And how to like tap into that and bring that forward. And again, go on a learning journey of like, you know what? Guess what? I just made things a little bit more difficult, but that's what I bring to the table. And like giving yourself permission to like do those big things and be disruptive. And at the end of the day, recognizing that if you are an Earth Genasi, they also have a ability called Earthwalk, where you can actually move across difficult terrain without expending the extra movement. So like even the difficult terrain that they're creating is like easy peasy, like moving across it. So again, might be disruptive for other folks around them, but like their ability to navigate those difficult circumstances and difficult terrain, however that might metaphorically show up in your life, comes a little bit easier with this character, which again, you can lean into and learn from and see what that's like.
Oh, I just love you so much, Jared. I love this character you're creating. Like, yeah. Sorry, I don't want to keep. I know we just went on a little side quest there, but like, yes, yes, yes to all of it. Yes, 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 yes.
Coaching is all about the side quests, so I'm here for it.
We love a side quest here at Coaches and Dragons.
So with that, Autumn, any final thoughts on Brianite and our wild side druid?
I mean, this is so cool. Like, you continue to surprise me in this, and like this one, I feel like a druid has always felt like an overwhelming option. Wizards as well have felt like very overwhelming options to me. And what you've put together, like, it's that druid that I'm like, oh, I can play this. I can play this and I can lean in and I can have fun. And, you know, I love that focus and that attention on like, there's the earth and there's this and there's space and bringing it all together. Like, it's so just like, this character is the character I needed. Like, I don't know what else to say. I feel like this is the character that I needed. There's something about it that maybe you were sensing it. I needed that grounding, right? I was calling it out. I need that grounding. And like, I am trying to go wild. Maybe this is that chaotic good life, you know, and sometimes there's pulling in different directions when you're trying to do that chaotic good stuff. I don't know, but I love it. I'm really excited. I'm excited for people to play around with this too, because I'm like, is it just me that's having this big response? Like, or is this just like one of those characters everybody's gonna be in love with? I don't know.
See. Yeah, I think what was really cool, especially bringing in more of that space theme, to your point about kind of the chaotic good energy, I think, and I think when I decided on this character, I think there's a neutral good aspect to them, right? And this idea of that the planets go in their orbit, but even there's like sometimes like errors in the math, like things happen. There's an asteroid, there's a shooting star, there's like these unexpected things that happen, and like being at peace with both the order and the rhythm and the cycles of the stars, but then letting that be access to those like beautiful errors in the sky. Like, what are those chaotic good moments to celebrate in a universe and sky that is otherwise very much follows its rules and is lawfully ordered and going on about its business, and like having that ability to hold both? Because I think the wild side could very much be seen as this, hey, let loose and go into that chaotic energy. And it's like, actually, there's a space between. There's a space that is free and big and powerful and shows up, that sits between like, let's break things and like, let's keep things in order. And like finding a way to kind of marry those two is, I think, something that really surprised me with this character.
Yeah.
Like you said, especially compared to characters we've done in the past.
Yeah. I feel like I've had some time to kind of like be able, it's really like hit me. So I'm going to try to do a little bit of a better job to articulate why it is that I love this character, just in case this is helpful for you or anybody else. So I think the things that I love about it, it is getting out of the mindset of focusing on intelligence and focusing instead on like, look, you know things, and rely on the fact that you know things to be open to the unknown instead of fearing the unknown, to be excited about the unknown. So I really love that about the character. I really love the opportunity to limit the choice around change, because I think that as we have a few different personas that we can grab onto to help us tap into a certain energy or have a different perspective for various activities, I think that having a few to pick from rather than dozens helps to mimic like what we actually want for people like our clients to have, which is, you know, maybe I have like 3 to 5 members of my party. Which one am I tapping into for this thing that I need right now? And I love just having a few gives that option for people to go and explore. Yeah, and then having these boundaries that are still open, this like, I want to go and experience it all, like, but the boundary of Earth to space is huge, but it still is confined in a way, right? Because like, we're also saying what it's not when we do that, and that's incredibly exciting. And to think about like the play with the terrain, again, there's so much in there to learn about what happens, what's the impact that you can have while not doing damage, right? You're not harming somebody else, but maybe you're slowing things down. Maybe you're making things more challenging, you know? And I think there's a lot of interest in like the strategy of like the battle strategy that comes from playing that character is going to be, I think, really interesting to say, like, to apply into real life. Yeah. Where do I want to have that rough terrain? Where do I want to smooth out the terrain? Where do I need that mage hand? I love it.
Well, that feels like a great place to end and just wrap up today's character build. So with that, thank you guys for listening, and let us know what kind of Wildside Druid you would build in the comments below. And until next time, remember, chaotic good vibes only.
Chaotic good vibes only.
Ciao.
Bye.